Om Shanti. Welcome to Inner Fitness, and we're going to start with a reflection. As I go through the day, a lot of my inner energy is spent on the surface of my mind. Imagining that my mind is like an ocean. And I spend a lot of time on the surface, where there's lots of waves and activity, constantly confronting one wave after another, different scenes, different roles, different activity, and reflecting on how much energy that takes from my mind to manage at that surface level. And then I dive deep. It becomes more quiet, less waves. In essence, less to think about as I dive deep. The energy of my mind is able to focus more on the few key things that really matter as I go through the day. Less energy required, but more depth experienced. I contrast the two. Being on the surface with the waves, and being in the depths where it's more calm, less complicated. And just noticing the difference in energy required. Managing my own energy is so valuable, so important as I move through the day. Then I end the day not tired, but refreshed, recharged. Om Shanti. So our topic today is finishing power. This was a popular request from the masses. so that's what we're going to talk about. And it's often been said that we have no problem starting things. So I think the example that comes to many of our minds is, at the beginning of a new year, we have so much enthusiasm, so much determination to make new changes, start new lifestyle approaches. And then it could be anywhere from a few weeks to a few months. We start to see the enthusiasm start to wane. And how can I finish what I started? Continue that till I reach the objective. So when we think about finishing power, always starting from the outer fitness, when we think about physical fitness or physical endeavors, what comes to your mind when you hear finishing power?
I have to say, It's not a very elevated one that came to mind.
Mm.
So my brother would play this arcade game,
Mhm.
and there would be two individuals who were fighting with each other, and you would hear in the background, finish them all. But in terms of like competition, you're trying to end something.
Mm.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um, I guess another way to be thinking about it, I guess maybe it's not really answering questions as much as giving me a question, was that I was trying to see the difference between endurance power and finishing power.
Mm. Yeah, they probably have a connection. Hmm. So is there a feeling for you that there is something about, or a difference or a connection between finishing and endurance?
Well, I guess, I mean, as I was saying, I was one who had requested for this topic, me and the masses, was because I was thinking about the old, some students often say, it doesn't feel like the old finishes, and the old stuff is just still there.
Mm.
Um, and why is that? Right, there is endurance, you keep going, but am I actually sort of completing what I'm supposed to be doing? You could keep the project going on and on and on, and do lots of things with it.
Mm.
But I don't know, I guess I was feeling that there's a sense of completion.
Mm.
Um, I feel it has a different role to play. I just remember looking that up in terms of, it's there's like a determined end to something. And in this case, it's something you're overriding. If we're talking about projects, maybe that opponent example wasn't a very good example, but using that internally, there's something that you're facing and it just keeps coming up. Like you're not able to somehow let go of it. You're not able to move on.
So in truth, I've seen many different applications of finishing power on the physical level, which kind of fascinates me. One is to simply finish what you started in whatever shape you can, just finish what you started. So if you're, we have that idea of the marathon runner or the 10K or the 5K. And, even if they have to walk, they just, even if their hours find everyone else, this idea of, I started this race, I'm going to complete this race. So that's maybe the classic example of finishing power. And then there's sort of what I might call the other end of the spectrum, souls who don't know how to walk away from a project. They just don't know how to say it's done. They keep tinkering with it. I know that your father recently built a Titanic replica, and he probably could spend the rest of his life adding little touches to it. When does he walk away and say, this project is done? So painters or artists, often musicians, really struggle with this one, writers, because they always feel, they keep going back and revising and correcting. And when do they finally let this say it's finished? They could probably work on it till forever, and it never is released out into the world. So the original objective of the piece, if it's self-serving, this is something different. But if it was to inspire or communicate something to the world, that never happens because it's never released. So they need to kind of know it's done, let it go. So that's another side, the opposite almost. And then there's the one that I was thinking about a lot, and it involves being able to sustain. So a bit of both, I suppose. But when I think about, souls who, there's a quantity and quality mix here. So those who are unable to walk away from a project and say it's done, they're obsessed with quality. And those who say, in whatever shape I am, I'm going to finish this. It's just quantity. I just need to throw myself, crawl across the finish line, whatever it takes. Even if there's no dignity, I can say, I finished it. And then there's this kind of blend of the two, where you have a certain amount of time. So that's going to help to, you have, at this point, it's hands off, right? Like you're not going to be able to continue with this, but so you have this amount of time. And for some, it's a challenge even to get to that defined endpoint, to reach that. And then there's this interesting thing. It's, yes, I'm going to finish it, but I'm going to finish it with a certain quality. So it's not just quantity, but I have a fixed time in which, but there's a quality too. And this happens quite a bit in a fitness class. So you're in the fitness class, it's interval training, you have 30 seconds on the clock. So some, I don't even like to count down, because I know when they hear 5 seconds, they're going to stop moving, right? You have 5 seconds left and they take that as the end. It's not. You have 5 seconds left means you have 5 seconds left. So you want them to use the full 30 seconds. You want to finish that quantity, but you also say you have 5 seconds left. What are you going to do with those 5 seconds? And some, you know, you almost give them that vision of, see the finish line. You're gonna push through the finish line. So in other words, what quality are you going to complete with? And this requires what I call overcoming obstacles or resistance. This is a huge part of finishing power. So I need to keep my eye on the finish line, keep my eye on the destination. There's a certain quantity element involved, but also I want to finish with a certain, like I want to feel, I do not want any regrets at the end of that time period. That's probably my favorite cue for interval training is you have 5 seconds left. You do not want any regrets at the end of those 5 seconds because they're not coming back. So how will I use that? I check in. What quality of effort do I have left? And most of us underestimate that, to be honest. But what quality of effort do I have left? There's massive resistance at that point. You're exhausted. You just want to lie down and have a snack. So you're going to have to, and that's why the commentary, the reflection started about energy, because overcoming challenges and resistance is so much about internal energy management that this happens physically as well, you know, souls who know how to, I know this was supposed to be progressions, but that's learning how to increase your capacity to pace yourself. So I've always been in awe, you know, when I get on the treadmill, it's like, I keep saying, can I really call this running on the treadmill? I think I'm jogging. I can't really call it. And then I look at other people, I've got this incredible pace that they're able to sustain over a long period of time. And they had to train to get up to that quality. So we want to manage our energy, learn how to manage our energy so we can keep a certain quality of pace through our effort. And we are notoriously poor at managing our energy because it starts with managing our thoughts. And we usually pay no attention to our thoughts. So much of our energy is draining during the day, you know, and we actually have the capacity for massive amounts of enthusiasm and energy and what we call override. But we're not accessing that because all of our energy is busy really kind of battling with the surface stuff. What's that person wearing? Why did they do that? I can't get over, you know, lots of surface stuff. So that's kind of connected to the aspect you brought up, which is a quality aspect. I'm trying to finish something. So that's my objective, is at the end of this time period I've given, I am transformed. That's actually, obviously we're moving into the spiritual realm. That is, but there's many, you know, one of the most popular, I don't know if it is anymore because people are realizing that well-being has many dimensions to it, but one of the very popular for a while, sort of over time projects was body transformation, which always made me shudder a bit because that might happen naturally if I'm engaging in a certain quality of training, but for some it doesn't. There's no physical signs, but their health actually has improved. So, but there used to be a lot about body transformation. So physically, this idea that I have a period of time, say 24 weeks, and I'm going to engage on this body transformation journey. And there's many, at the end of it, the idea physically is that this body looks differently. I have finished the old form and I've got a new form. That's what transform means, to change the form. So the idea being that I'm going to get here and there's no, if you check in with me 5 years from now, this form is still intact. That form was completely finished, which means a sustainable lifestyle change has happened, obviously. Now, what led to this form over here was certain lifestyle habits. So it's not so much that I'm sort of reshaping my body like clay, but I'm exploring these lifestyle, this way of life that led to that external form. And I want to transform at that deeper level so that I have a sustainable, it's like, if you will, that old form is dead. That old lifestyle is kind of dead. And what's going to be needed for that to happen? And one of the top things that souls embarking on that kind of journey, not always, although I think more and more Google is their personal trainer, but they seek out a personal trainer. They seek out someone with experience to be a guide. That's really important. But to understand that that trainer, that guide can't do it for me. It can provide experience, wisdom, but they still can't do it for me. So that means there's two pieces, because sometimes we'll have these body transformation programs and a handful of souls will engage and we'll notice that they all start at the same starting line. What happens at the finishing line, there's a variety of things that can happen. Zero change, dropped off along the way. So clearly they have the same trainer, the same program, but it's not just the trainer, it's what I bring as well. How much determination, how much faith, how much belief, how much energy management of all those crazy thoughts that are going to come along to try and pull me off the program. So all of that is kind of involved in finishing power. We say it's such a head game. Finishing power is such a head game, whether it's finishing something old, like complete transformation, or finishing to that line, that quantity kind of thing, just that's a complete head game, you know, or being able to carry a certain quality through to the finish line. All of those are head games. You know, I know for myself, I kind of find it fascinating. It happened earlier today. It was interval training and, you know, the instructor saying, okay, you've got 10 more seconds. Now, this particular instructor doesn't use a timer. So when they have 10, you have 10 more seconds. If they get, we hope they don't get distracted because those 10 seconds, which you are hanging on with your fingernails, can turn into 30 seconds. It's rather a miserable situation. But the point is that I'm going to keep going till they say done. And I know eventually they'll say done, even if they completely wander off somewhere. So I always find it interesting to go inside, and it's like, although I'm doing very physical, ballistic, external, inside I become quite concentrated and still. It's such an energy management game, becoming very still and concentrated. You can just feel this will building power, breaking through, because that's how you have transformation gains on a physical level, is overcoming resistance. It doesn't need to be big. It doesn't need to, you're lying on the floor almost dead. That's not what we're talking about. But in these incremental changes is transformation. And so with the spiritual journey, you know, this is such a reality for us. We're constantly coming up against the old form, which is that old sense of self. And so this transformation, for example, in Raj Yoga is to restore, a very basic way of saying it is the highest potential of the self, trying to restore that original, pure, authentic state, the true self. But I've been engaging in such habits of living that it's created this other form of myself, this other way, very physical form of myself. And that is going to be a constant resistance. It's constantly going to be coming up. So I have to have a really good internal management system to be able to work with that resistance and get through that complete transformation. In spiritual practice such as Raj Yoga, we have the same components. We have a trainer who we call God. We have a trainer, the Supreme Soul, but we also have to bring our own kind of determination, enthusiasm, belief, our own efforts to the table. And it's the blending of those two that determine the results. So when I was thinking about finishing power today, I was thinking a lot about, these original students, because we take an example here, like Mama, who over, I don't know what it was, from 36 to 45, it's what? 36 to 65, sorry, 36 to 65. So roughly 30 years, maybe a little under. So sustaining, that sounds like a long time. There have been souls in this study for over 80 years, just to give you perspective. So over 30 years, that soul didn't know it would be 30 years old. Well, maybe they did. I really don't know what was going on inside that soul. But over 30 years, that soul sustained. This is finishing power isn't just, I got to that. It's what happened along the way indicates. Because we're always like, oh, but they started off with such a bang. And then they're suddenly gone, right? We have these stories, like what happened? So we want to look at what's going on over the entire course of the journey, how they're managing themselves and using their trainer over the entire course of the journey. Because in those 30 years, what that soul, the quality of what that soul achieved is remarkable when we compare it against those who've been in the study for even twice as long, if not longer. What that soul achieved, there was so much finishing power indicated along the way. It's very connected to endurance or sustaining, because you're constantly overriding. And when you override, you've created something sustainable, right? So this idea of, okay, so what kind of guidance am I getting from my trainer, in this case, God, who basically keeps saying, remember who you really are, remember who you really are, and use me, connect to me, draw energy from me. Don't try and do this on your own energy, use my energy. That's really this. So we know that this soul mama was super accomplished at those two things. And we can even see in a physical fitness class, I know for me, when I'm in a class with an instructor who has, you can call it charisma or energy or whatever, they create you can tell that people are drawing energy from the instructor, also from the company. That's why many people like group fitness is that we create this kind of matrix, if you will, of energy. So energy management is super important. Learning how to think less and use God more. This is the sign of someone who's got good finishing power. They're really set up for sustainable change that is not going to revert back. And so lots of obstacles are going to come along the way. Every single obstacle is the status quo, every single one, 100% of every obstacle that arises is the status quo fighting back. Now, many will argue with me, says, no, there's external. If you explore spirituality enough, you will know that whatever is happening externally is a result of my own past actions, that old stuff. is creating, so we often use the example of the pool table that, someone comes into a pool game halfway and they sort of see the balls on the table and they seem to be obstructing, getting others in the pocket. And they're like, wow, this is a really bad situation here. And you explain, actually, the balls are there from my previous moves. My own previous activity created this situation. So once you sort of realize that, you realize, wow, it's all coming from my own old stuff, all of it. No one's doing anything to me. It's my own. And you really get that in a fitness class. It was sweet. One of the participants came up to me and said, because of course we haven't been doing anything some have been doing things, but not at the level that we were doing it before. So for 15 months, we're just trying to get finished is what we're trying to do. And, I think we all became very aware today because the class we took was really hard. And we all became very aware today of just how much of our fitness level really kind of went down. But I wouldn't say that we reverted back. I always feel if we hadn't been in that level of shape, things would have gotten a lot worse. We had enough to sustain ourselves. But anyways, they came up to me and said, my calves have been hurting so much. And this is new for them. It's like, well, yeah, because, we weren't doing the same type of activity. And then we come back and we're jumping in the parking lot on concrete. I mean, it's understandable. He says, what can I do? I said, just keep going. Just the old, which means in this case, the activity that you were doing is actually creating that challenge right now. It's not anyone doing anything to us. It's just the result of what old activity or inactivity has been going on. So once I realized, wow, everything that's happening, all of this resistance is actually a result of my own inner old stuff, then that understanding is really going to help me to manage my inner system. Because what happens if we don't have that understanding? We start to create theories of what the problem is. And this is a massive waste of energy. We start to think too much. In one sentence, I can often finish. What is the old stuff? Top of the list is ego. Top of the list is ego. We can call it lack of self-respect. That is the number one obstruction to transformation.
So what does it mean then when it's ego and it's still commentary?
It's a very worthy foe is what it means. That's all it means, is it's a very worthy foe, right? So when I'm in this class, and I remember there was what happens in this class is you have 3 exercises and you do 30 seconds. I say that loosely because again, the instructor does not use a timer, so it feels more like an hour, but 30 seconds of 3 exercises and sequence 2 rounds, no recovery. And I remember there was one series of 3, does the first exercise, okay, and it's later in the class, so you've got that fatigue going on, which again is the result of my own previous lack of activity. So fatigue's going on, okay, I can do the first one. The second exercise, a little challenge, and then he hits us with the third one, which was really horrible. And I remember this inner dialogue, of having to be so careful with my thoughts. I'm in the second round, I'm doing the second exercise. I know now what the third exercise is. Part of me is like, I don't know if I can do it. And part of me is like, what are you talking about? Of course you can do it. Like there was this fascinating mental activity going on. And I was just the observer of it, not sure which one was going to win, what was going to happen. It's like, no, you can do it. This isn't a problem for you. I know you have what you have. I know that you can do it. You just have to do it properly. You don't have any energy left for bad technique or anything. You really have to do it properly, but you can do it. And I remember that side started to gain. So when we're talking about, what spirituality tells me is that there's almost 2 of us. There's the spiritual, true, pure us. And this is why we're told to constantly keep this information. Who is me? Who is not me? And then there is this kind of body conscious, not really me stuff. And they're constantly having a debate inside, but the pure side doesn't really care about the debate. So this one gets most of the airtime. Because right, the true side it's a very quiet. So this side is getting all the airtime, and it sounds super convincing, super powerful, really intimidates us. If you want to talk about bullying, that's and I say most external bullying is a result of ego, of insecurity, absolutely, but really bullies us, us who's trying to change, transform, really bullies and convinces us that it is right, that it is valid. And what spirituality does, and I love seeing this at the beginning because it's at the beginning, the foundation, that the finishing power is created. Most of us don't think about that. It's actually it's really, if you think about a house, the sustainability of that house, etc., it's going to depend on how it was built at the beginning. What is going to happen to it over time. So we've got that converse. They don't build things the way they used to. They fall apart. They were building things differently. It's not like, oh, the car is suddenly getting better, I'm doing things. It's how it was built at the beginning that it's able to last over this period of time. And it's quite funny when we talk about new technology, it has such a short lifespan. And yet we say it's better. It's actually not. It's a sign that things are getting worse when it doesn't have that sustainability. And we know it's a sign of things getting worse because we're dealing with so much issues around environmental waste, etc. If we weren't throwing things away so much, we wouldn't, so if things just lasted longer, that depends on how they're built. What happens at the beginning, right? So we saw at the beginning for these students who had incredible longevity, you could almost tell at the beginning, they're going to finish, given the foundation they had at the beginning, how much they were able to experience that true voice, who I really am. This is super, super critical. And if it hasn't happened, it's almost like I'm halfway through the race. I think this happened to you yesterday. You got so far and then you had to come back to get your phone. It's like, but did you think, oh, I'm too far along? No, I'm not going to be able to get anywhere. I'm not going to be able to finish the job if I don't go back and get the phone. They're not going to let me in the building. So I have to go. So sometimes it's like, I have to go back to the starting line. It's not a waste of time because I'm not going to be able to finish anyways. Right? I'm going to leave. So go back. Take that time to, rebuild the foundation. I need to have a powerful experience of my true form. So there is a voice as I'm going along to speak to that resistance, which is largely ego. It's also fear, etc. But speak to that resistance that's coming up from living with that old consciousness, thinking I'm the body, be able to speak to that voice, largely of ego, and says, actually, that's not true. And I find it really powerful. I was watching something yesterday and it really touched my heart. Many celebrities receive, of course, lots of beautiful attention, but so much hate through social media. They receive so many negative comments. And I find that's a whole nother conversation, why on earth that would happen. Why I find it fascinating because we would never want anyone to do that to us. So why on earth do we think, and we do it all the time. I hear people talk about politicians this way. We're doing it all the time. Somehow in our mind, that crazy, acquired, not me state is saying, it's completely valid for you to say this. It's like, no, it's never valid. To give sorrow to another human being is never valid. I never want anyone to do it to me. Why on earth would it be all right? But that not me state, again, is so convincing. And it says, you have to get upset with this person. And we have no voice of clarity to God. We're completely overcome by this old self that's not even really me. It's a fact. But anyways, these celebrities, and I remember, seeing, and it really, it really gets to, it really, really eats at them. And you just want to say, it's got nothing to do with you. I just want to scream at them. It's got nothing, but they need to have a voice inside that will be able to see clearly, this isn't about me. This is about the person who wrote the message. The person who wrote the message clearly has some issues within themselves that they would even be able to say something that vindictive. They don't even know me. How can, so it's really fascinating, these voices in our head and managing that. And I need to have a voice of truth and clarity inside. Sometimes we call it willpower. Sometimes we call it maturity. Sometimes we just call it common sense. But we need to have that voice that can get through that old stuff, the voice of the old stuff that will come up. It comes up in a fitness class. It's like, oh, I'm too tired. I can't do this. Like, no, actually, I'm in here to do this. so maybe I'll modify for now, but I'm doing this because I'm not going to see any transformation or gains if I don't have incremental changes along the way. If I keep going back to the old, we call that cycling, I'm not going to get that sustainable change. So we saw at the beginning of the organization, we saw how these souls had a very deep experience of their true self, which is as a spiritual being. Very deep experience, we could say self-respect, deep experience of their own capacity, like such a deep, not just thoughts, it starts with thoughts, but it's a journey of taking it much, much deeper. Really such, so now they have something solid to respond to the inevitable old stuff that's going to come up. Now we saw this played out. And this is why I find it very fascinating. The fact that I am sitting here talking to you, the Brahma Kumaris organization exists 80 plus years later, is because of what happened at the beginning. The amount of resistance that we saw, it was a very important lesson for us to witness and hear about. It was on a very overt, and I think there's a reason for that because it's such a good lesson. They got so much resistance from the community, so much resistance. And watching how they responded with their finishing form, if you will. They responded with their true self. That really was all that happened. They just, it was like the status quo of the community was very, very threatened by change. And that's the way status quo works. It does not want to die. It was super threatened, and it just sort of fights back, and it doesn't even fight in a sensible way. I mean, when we look at some of the things that happen, it just sounds crazy, the way the resistance showed up in terms of really kind of trying to frighten small children or all sorts of crazy things that they were doing, because that's how much the status quo, it's understandable, the old fights back. So we saw that played out externally. How did those first students respond? From their true self, that very elevated, self-respectful stage. There was no violence. Sometimes there was not even any verbal response. We saw again and again that they responded from this really, they did not buy what was coming at them from the old. The old was calling them this and that and saying this and that, and they just did not. They had a space, a place to stand that they could respond and maintain clarity, right? And therefore, in such a beautiful way, overcome those challenges, no resistance, lots of royalty. So that needs to happen for the self too. I want to use, we say, sort of supreme, the God's power to help me in this. So I've got this incredible, it might be thousands against me and just me, but God is with me. This is going to this is going to even out the playing field, even though it's just me and God against all these crazy voices inside. So we often say we just don't use God enough. We just don't use the resources enough. We try and go hand-to-hand combat. We're never going to win. Never. So we're not using God enough, the way that that being sees me. And I'm not really taking the time to establish my own vision on myself. These are two important things that are going to get me through all of that status quo until it's not happening anymore. That old stuff isn't it, it just sort of gets tired and gives up and says, they're ignoring me. That feeling that it's done, it's finished, it's resolved, it's not going to come back. So it's really interesting when you see souls building that power in a physical way. At first they're like, oh, I can't live that. And then a few months later, it's nothing for them. How did they build that power? So that weaker state isn't exerting itself anymore. They don't even think about it. They just, it's quite remarkable when you see someone in 1 week and then 12 weeks later you see them and say, what happened? It's like their former self isn't even there, right? So there was a journey along the way. They had that trainer, the trainer had a vision on them, deep belief, giving them guidance, giving them lots of support. But they also had, we can say, deep faith in the self or a vision of themselves that was established very early. And that's really helping them to finish obstacles along the way. They have a response. So it's a pretty interesting, it's a lot of self-management. We use the term, of course, willpower, I will. And I suppose that, but the voice that's saying I will is this voice of deep belief in the self or faith in the self that has a vision, has had a experience of, I know what I am able to do, right? So really deep vision of the true self, which God can also is trying to give to us, tell us who we really are. So we will give you the final word because I'm looking at the time.
Well, a couple of things. When you were sharing that you were having an experience in your interval training, and it was you can do that, right? There's like, oh no, I can. I know that was a physical example, but I also feel it was likely because actually it was coming from somewhere spiritual. That response, that's your inner voice, the true you. And I know you were saying in the original days, the original jewels, it first comes to the level of thoughts. Would you say that how deep that penetrates for that counter voice to ego to be more natural, to be less like I'm just saying a script?
Right. Yeah. So we talk about thoughts because I need to at least get the food in the fridge and on the plate. But that's not going to be enough. It's great to buy healthy food and have it in the fridge and open the fridge and says, wow, I got a lot of healthy food. But eventually I'm going to have to eat the food and it's going to be incorporated into the body. The body will become that healthy food in a form that looks very different from what it looks like in the fridge. It becomes, different elements and in the body, it's broken down to nutrients. The same thing happens with spirituality. We're given spiritual thoughts, truths, to think about, but that's not enough. It's now in the mouth, but I need to digest it into my being and it will transform. The thought will turn into self-respect, patience, self-love, self-discipline. It will transform into those things, looking very different than the original thought if I have digested it. So I always find, as an example, the level of self-discipline that Mama and all of these original students have. And some souls try and follow that, but they haven't eaten the food that they ate, right? They didn't digest the thoughts sufficiently because that's where that self-discipline came from. There's no violence in their self-discipline. It's a result of digesting spiritual truths. It will show up in different signs and signals in terms of the discipline with the self, the clarity, the honesty, the patience, all of these ways of managing the self are a result of digesting. So yes, it needs to go from thoughts into a realization, into awareness, a way of being, a reality. And that's, I'm going to have to learn how to check within myself, because sadly, repeating it is not a sign that it's gone deep.
But not bothering is also not helpful.
Not bothering is also.
Because I think that, I'm not sure who, maybe it was Tanya, another student mentioned that she's sensitive to just being false. And
Yeah.
I would not want to bother being false.
Right.
And I resonate with that because at the same time, it can have a double-edged sword and you don't bother attempting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we definitely see this in fitness, is I don't want to hurt myself. I don't want to look stupid. So I don't do it at all. And yes, I don't want people to injure themselves. So that I have to figure out, how can I go about this in such a way that I reduce the odds I'm going to injure myself? Is there a third option between I don't do it at all, or I just go like a crazy person and injure myself? There is another option where I do it in a very wise way, such that I reduce the odds of injuring. So similarly in spirituality, it's like, I need to do this. I need to cultivate that inner compass so I can constantly check, am I still authentic? Am I still authentic? So that I'm not just aborting the whole project, but I've got this kind of belief in myself that I will be able to detect if I'm no longer being authentic. And it's absolutely fine to be doing something and saying, you know what, I am being totally false right now. That's great. That's okay. At least your compass is still working, rather than, no, I'm not going to do that, because whenever I do that, I'm just not real, or it's just too heavy, or, I'm gonna, okay. So there's going to be a piece of your life, you're going to have to arrange your life such that you always avoid that particular thing, because I can't master it. And that's something I've really been thinking about a lot lately, is we, especially in the West, where we have so much choice, we like to engineer our lives so that things are complementing how I am comfortable operating right now. So I'm kind of in stasis. I'm kind of stuck. And that's not the way things always work. Sometimes you are partnered with someone who works a different way, or sometimes you are given resources that may not be what you're used to. Sometimes you're put in situations that seem very foreign to you. And wonderful opportunities to check, can I maintain myself? Can I still have mastery in this situation? Or do I just abort? Like sometimes I know I'm given exercises that are like, wow, this is really strange. Like, I'm not sure, but like part of me is like, is it possible to maintain alignment and do this exercise? Right? And sometimes it's like, no. In which case I'm probably going to talk to someone about it, try and understand it. Maybe it's too dangerous or whatever, but I want to always check with honesty what is going on. And check my motives behind my decisions or choices. It requires tremendous honesty. This, again, is not compatible with ego. Most of the things that we need to do are not compatible with ego, right? Most ego doesn't like any of this, right? That is the ultimate transformation, is to be liberated from ego, from the false image. That is the ultimate transformation. And oddly enough, it's a return to my true form. So I'm just trying to change back into myself.
I think the other thing that really just hit me when you were sharing that finishing power isn't just at the end. It's what my quality of effort is through the entire thing. And that's where I was like, how does this relate to sustain? And then I realized that the quality of what I'm sustaining, what energy I'm conserving, it isn't just at the end.
If you talk to a marathon runner and about race day, they'll start talking to you about the previous day. what they had for dinner the previous day, how much rest they had the previous day, how much wine, and then they'll start backing it up even further than that. Their training, their periodization, they'll just, the preparation, the lead up to the actual race, what's going to make it possible for them to get that finish line is a long foundation that determined finishing the race. Yes, a lot's going on in the race, but even that mind game is because of their preparation, their training, their foundation. They would have done a lot of, we have that great example of Alan Hobson, his I can, I will, I can, I will, on the treadmill, I can, I will. That training of the mind is what enabled him to finish getting to the top of Mount Everest. It's not at that moment that I'm, okay, I gotta have willpower. No, I need to have that muscle developed over a long period of time. The foundation, the preparation is super important, so am I going in, have I taken that time to create that kind of foundation? We just say that deep belief in the self, and many find they start and they have to circle back to the foundation, and it's okay. It's okay. Something will come along and say, I don't really have that powerful foundation. It's okay. Because I'm not going to get there anyways without that. So go back and reinforce the foundation. I'd say we're reinforcing the foundation every day of our spiritual journey.
Well, it makes one really wonder how much there could be a subtle form of carelessness.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, I revise that. No, I know why I'm doing this. But I know students have always mentioned there was something they were seeking coming into the study, and then through time, it's like
They forgot about
they
it.
forgot. It's like,
Why did I come here? It wasn't for name, fame, and recognition. No, it wasn't. I came here for self-respect. I came here to get myself back. Right?
and you can't. I
be
realize
at
you
peace.
can't be lazy with keeping that purpose clear.
I know for myself, I find this a very fascinating topic. I guess you could say getting off track, but it would look very funny if we watched a race, right? They're going and then they suddenly, oh, that fan's in love with me. I'll just run over there. I mean, that would look crazy, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious in the race that if they suddenly go running off to be with the fans or get a picture with someone, but that's what happens in spirituality, get totally derailed. And suddenly it's like, I want a big center. I want this many students. I want to do big projects. And I'm not saying those actually are all outcomes that these original students, but it wasn't coming from ego.
That wasn't their purpose.
No, it was a natural result of transforming themselves. Natural result. It came from such a clean place. So you really have to, why did I come here? They were always very aware. We came here to transform ourselves. And it's very safe because we say all the subjects in the study, including so-called service, is part of that self-transformation. So they were never deceived in thinking service is a separate topic, because there's a lot of traps that can totally derail me from, why am I here again? It's like, oh, wow, we're getting so many numbers. And whoa, wait, I came here to transform myself. Wait. So there's no finishing power if I completely forget where the finish line is, right? So really have to. But I think that if the soul, and this is part of the foundation, if the soul has a lot of disinterest, what we saw with the original students is they had sometimes one of these, or for many of them, both of these. They either had deep, we saw with Brahma Baba, a deep sense of feeling something was missing in the self. They were missing their highest potential. That was very clear in Brahma Baba. But then you have Dadi Janki missing that relationship with God. So they might have one or the other, and eventually they both. This is why they came. Both of them boil down to, I'm missing my original self. I'm missing my true self. And God, who we remember as the truth, is the one, the trainer I'm going to need to get it back. So I'm missing my trainer who helps me to get, it's not even ultimately about God. God is a means to get my true self back. But it's like, I come here missing myself. I'm not at peace with myself. I've deceived myself into having all these accoutrements of the so-called quality of life, and I am missing and I am absent in my life. It's just an image, right? Roles, stuff, whatever. I am completely absent. I know I'm absent because of the character is not there. I'm reactive, I'm irritated, I'm impatient, all of this. I'm really missing myself. So that was so strong. We say it's disinterest, but it's actually profound. They were disinterested in being disconnected from themselves and God anymore. They had a profound interest in getting themselves back, deep interest. And that was sustained through the entire journey. I want to realize myself. And God is the only one who can make that possible for me. It's a spiritual issue. There is no human being, bodily being, who can do that for me. And so that was it was like this tempo, as they're running along this constant tempo. They didn't forget they were not distracted along the way. It was such a deep interest inside, and they had no taste for anything else. So they were so fixed on the aim and objectives, so fixed on the target. And that we get careless about. We get distracted. We get into doingness.
We see all of these golden deers can totally.
It's sort of the illusion of achievement, or something's going on here. And sometimes, we try and compliment each other, and it's fine, but I don't want to be distracted. Right? It doesn't mean I ignore people. It's absolutely fine. But it's not like you say, oh, that was a lovely class you gave. That doesn't change me. The only thing that's going to change me is me changing, like getting closer to my objective is what will make the heart happy, is that I'm really changing, right? And I realized along the way, this lesson very early, that the gap. The other day I was laughing because I was seeing an article written by someone who said that they hadn't smiled for so many years because they had a gap. And it wasn't until a gap was fixed that they were smiling. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds interesting. That did not sound familiar, but I understand this gap business, but it doesn't stop me from smiling. I might horrify people, I don't know, but it
just makes you smile more.
It makes you smile more and look very goofy. And there's lots of gums too. The whole thing is just a gong show, right? So I found that very interesting, because what happened was that soul is in a culture where this is considered unsightly. But if they go to another culture, they say, please smile, we love your gap. And that's when I realized about this. Look, one person can come to me and say, oh, I love when you do this, and it means nothing. It says more about their personal preferences than anything else. Like someone else, the actual benefit, when we say to make others happy or benefit, there's only one thing that is of any use to any soul, and that's purity. If I can get closer to purity, if I can be an instrument to support souls, that's the only thing worthwhile. Doing my hair a certain way, having my teeth a certain way, this has nothing to do with anything useful. So it's only that pure heart that makes us be at peace with ourselves. So otherwise it's preferences. Oh, that person. I've literally heard people say one thing about a person, and the other one say, that's the exact thing I don't like about that person. Like it's so preference driven, right? It's fascinating, quite frankly, and I can't hook my sense of value on that stuff, just on purity. So we are very over time. So we'll just have a short reflection. With one thought, I go inside into that inner world, that inner space that seems a little separate from the noise of the outer world. It's a space where I can have honest dialogue with myself, and over time, a place where I can have honest dialogue with God. This is where I explore timeless aspects who I really am, what is my highest potential. And this is why this is a space that ultimately attracts the attention of God. The feeling that, this is a soul who really wants to transform, finish the past, return to the original, really restore peace in the heart, having that deep faith in the self. A deep recognition of my own true, authentic nature. We say humankind because the true nature of a human soul is to be kind, not to act or pretend or selectively be kind. But our natural nature is kind. That's the finish line. What kind of effort and preparation is required for this journey towards human kindness? That's what spirituality explores. Om Shanti. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time.